The 15-Point Plan is part of the Win, Make, Give podcast network.
Welcome to the 15-Point Plan podcast, and I'm your host, Jillene Snell, and I'm joined here by a mentor of mine from quite a few years back. I met this remarkable woman right around 10 years ago. I actually went into my email account and pulled up this person's email to find the last dated email I possibly could, and it was 10 years ago. And she was my very first business coach. And you might say I got really lucky to find and be connected with her because she's also the best coach, and was my first connection there in the coaching world. And here we are 10 years later on a podcast together, and I still get the opportunity to coach with her today. And this individual, her name is Debbie. She started a company from the ground up into a multi-million-dollar business today, which she owns along with the founder of the Win, Make, Give podcast, Ben Kinney. So I'll let Debbie introduce more of who she is and her story, but I definitely want you to listen to this incredible individual because I know it's hard for many to find solid mentors. And what I'm hoping is that this podcast can be some of that for you. So without waiting any further, welcome to the podcast, Debbie.
Thank you, Jillene. I love this topic of goal setting. Ben and I came from backgrounds where our families had basically zero money. And I can't speak for Ben. I can guess, though, that maybe like my parents, his parents did not sit around and have lengthy discussions about setting and achieving goals, right? And so that was something that I really didn't discover in a big way until at the age of 18 when I got my real estate license so that I could sell enough real estate to fund my college education. My first broker handed me the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Good book.
Yep, great book. He said, I want you to memorize this quote: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And he really got me set on the path of writing down goals and then creating the action steps to achieve them.
Excellent. So you had your own version of a mentor, all the way back then, who referred you to this book. And that was the starting point for you. And Debbie, I laugh when we talk about this concept of goal setting because people always joke with me and say, just do it, like Nike. Their famous phrase, just do it. And then I think in my head, if only it were that easy. Like there's no easy button of just doing it. And I know you have just done it. You started at a very young age in just doing it. But for all of us that's listening to the podcast, would you share with us a little bit of the starting point for goal setting? Give us a solid foundation for that.
Well, in the coaching company that Ben and I own together, I think one of the things that I really work hard with the coaches and our clients is to say, you want to begin with the end in mind. So in other words, if I said to you, Jillene, let's think ahead 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if everything went perfectly, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be financially? What do you want your life to look like? What you do inside of your day? Who do you want in your world? And where do you want to physically live? Maybe it's where you live now, maybe it's not. And yet, and it doesn't have to be hyper specific. If you have a vision though, here's where I would like to be, then we can start to construct the roadmap step by step, the blueprint, if you will, to take you down that path. Now, it may be along the path, something changes and you decide, maybe that's no longer my vision and my path now takes a different fork in the road. And yet really beginning to lay the foundation to get where you want to be. I think that's where great goal setting begins.
Absolutely. And there's this phrase, and another phrase called, how do you eat a mammoth? And that's one bite at a time. And it is breaking down something that seemingly feels overwhelming. Now, if we've got some people who don't necessarily know where they want to be, or what some of their specific goals are, maybe for the year or this month or any period of time. Like, is there something wrong with me if I feel that way? I'm not personally in that place, but I have been in the past. And so, what advice would you give to those people?
Well, a couple of things. I do think most people have goals, what they'd like to be doing, what they wish they had. Maybe they avoid calling it a goal because that might mean you have to have a plan to get there, maybe, right? So I
Sure.
think you could start off thinking about the things you say, I wish I could, or I wish I had. And yet there's also a different side to this. And I wish I could remember. I just remember it was a football player. I can't remember who, and it was a few seasons ago. What struck me though is he made the comment. People always ask me, what are my goals for my career? What are my goals for the season? And he said, I only focus on my goal for today's game. And I think that is not at all uncommon. That really super achievers sometimes have a very narrow focus. So that is not a bad thing, right? And so I think there could be two sides to that.
So, are you saying that, if I take today and I say I'm going to be a high achiever in whatever I do today, that some of our goals can develop from focusing on the micro, right? Some of our macro goals might just organically develop.
Yeah, or I guess what you just made me think of as you said that is that if you have a really clear plan for what your ideal day should be, and you stick with that plan with discipline and focus very rigorously, somehow then those goals magically occur. See, and I think that inside of that magic of repetitious boredom and doing the stuff that require, in some cases, a bit of grinding it out, people often are looking for something a little more glamorous when it comes to how they handle their day, or a little more fly by the seat of their pants, especially the entrepreneurs in our world, Jillene, and probably
Isn't that
entrepreneurs at large, right?
hmm lots of experience with that, including my own experience? Right. It's easy to get distracted by things that are a lot more fun. But you did say something. You said there's magic in it.
Mhm.
There's magic in following a routine and creating discipline for yourself. And magic is a sexy word. So we're just going to make goal setting a little bit more sexy with creating this magic behind it and knowing what that will do for us, right?
Well, and I think if we look at whatever your favorite athlete is or favorite sport, we'd probably all agree Tom Brady is a pretty amazing example. And there are many, right? Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I mean, there's just so many to name. And the sexy of winning that game doesn't show up until they do the repetitious boredom, until they practice, drill, rehearse, and perfect their routines of health and energy and exercise. That's all the hard parts that get them to that sexy win or victory or big goal that they wanted to achieve.
Mm, I like that. And I love the word that you said, energy, and how that keeping our energy high throughout the process. And that's what this podcast is focused on, is generating more energy for ourselves and our audiences. So thanks for touching on that. Now, as we're recording this podcast, we're about 5 months into the year. So we're not in that, December, January time period where everyone's just setting their goals and there's a lot of emotional excitement and backing behind it. Now, if we're midway through the year or a different part of the year, what's the best way for us to revisit some of the things that are important to us and maybe even reset our goals?
Well, even now, I think if you took a look at this and said, okay, what was my goal for the year? Let's talk about if it's financially or physical, or, those New Year's resolutions that you're still working on. What was that goal? And then how am I tracking towards it? And for me to achieve what I want to achieve by the end of the year, is it still achievable? Right. And that's especially easy to measure often if you're in some type of sales business,
Mm-hmm.
because you can track your production, and then you can say, well, I've got this many months left. Wow, no way. There's no way I can catch it up. Or absolutely, if I divide it up, break it down each month, and just step up my game by 20%, I can still do it. I do think it's very important to, at a minimum, quarterly, even monthly, though, look at those goals and say, do they need to be reset? Not that you're giving up on them too easily. It's just that if you no longer believe in them or you no longer are passionate about achieving them, you'll end up putting them in a drawer, throwing them away, or just feeling extremely guilty, which is not a positive space to be in. So I think it should be, always tell our clients, the goal shouldn't be easy, and yet you should passionately believe that it is achievable for you and that you really want it.
Great. And I think that's something that the audience can write down is this goal achievable when we're revisiting it, right?
Right.
And then that takes me into another question for you, which is, what do you think the reason is that most people give up on their goals? We've all heard the statistics of how soon people typically give up on their fitness goals after they set them, for January 1st. And none of us want to be put in that category, right? Of underachievers not reaching our goals. So why do most people give up on their goals when they do?
Well, I actually think it's pretty simple. They don't stick with the actions long enough for them to become a habit to get them to the goal. Because of being in the coaching world for the last 20 plus years, I've done a lot of study on how the brain works and how we do the things we do. And no one is born naturally disciplined. Certain personality styles may be a bit more driven, others may be a bit more laid back, and yet none of us are really born disciplined. And it's interesting, though, repetition creates a pattern in your brain. And you can read anything from 60 days to 4 months. Everyone has an opinion on that. And yet it takes a significant amount of time for that to become a pattern. Perfect example, any of you listening that have children, you might remember when they were very little, how difficult it was to program them to brush their teeth, to get that habit. I mean, I remember my daughters, it would be in the toilet, under the bed. They'd throw that toothbrush wherever they could to avoid the simple thing of brushing their teeth. It's not the highlight of your day. And yet now you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you don't think about it, you feel better when it's over. That's because you developed the pattern. So until their brain accepts it as a pattern, it is going to feel difficult. And if they don't do it consistently, it will never become a pattern. So therefore, it will always be intermittently difficult, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And it's the motivation and the emotional excitement that gets us started on something, right? But then what you're saying is the habit that keeps us going.
Right. It's a habit. And there was a great book I read. I don't remember which one it was. I read so many, so does Ben. And they picked up some college students and they said, we're going to take you out to the field. You're going to jump out of an airplane today. And they'd never done that. And they tested their stress levels, and they were, of course, through the roof, scared to death. In the course of the afternoon, they had them jump 5 times. By the 5th jump, their stress level was only mildly higher than it would be driving on the freeway in traffic. See, in the space of just an afternoon, they went from scared to death to mildly uncomfortable, just in one afternoon. So it just shows you how quickly your brain will adapt if you just stick with it long enough to give it that chance to do so.
That's fascinating. Would you say there's any other differences between people who are high achievers and, they have this, this laser focused on a goal or multiple goals, and they seem to always achieve them, and the person who doesn't?
Well, I did something a few years back that was why it was for real estate, and it was why are some people such super salespeople, super achievers, and others are not. And Jillene, you and I have seen in the real estate industry, great salespeople come in all shapes and sizes, right? And that's applicable to every industry, but all shapes and sizes can succeed. Why do some succeed more than others? Often it's mental toughness. You and I had a conversation not long ago about doing what you have to do, especially as a leader. You show up in the parking lot, you say it's showtime, you put your game face on, you go in the door. I think the strong do what others know they should do, but they simply don't. Right?
Mm.
So they do the tough stuff and they show up
Mm-hmm.
and do it every single day. And the key is whether they feel like it or not, because it's their job or it's their task if they're going to achieve whatever goal it is that they have set. And I know you've been a great runner and fitness queen for many years. I'm sure there were days you didn't or don't feel like running or working out, right?
Oh gosh, so many, Debbie. Yep.
And yet you do it because you know how great it feels and because you have that strong goal. So it's totally okay not to feel it every day. I remember once saying to that same broker, I think I was exhausted, it'd been crazy, and I said, I don't know, maybe I've lost my mojo, maybe I'm over it, maybe I shouldn't do this because I don't love it, I don't feel it right now. He said, well, that's why it's called work, not vacation. But he did say something to me that was really awesome, and I have thought of this many times over the last many years. He said it is okay that you don't always feel excited about it. That
Mhm.
will come back. That will kick in. A new win, a new success will bring it all roaring back. Just show up, put your body where it needs to be to achieve those goals that you have set. Even if you're not at 100%, you're only at 80%, it's okay. And it's going to kick back in when something sets you off and you get super excited again. And that comforted me because I thought if I don't feel it like, yay, wow, this is amazing, I love it, then I'm toast, I'm done. And he's like, no, that's normal, it'll come back.
I hope our audience actually hits the rewind button a couple times just to listen to that over again because that was so good. And just plugging in, and actually, the 15-point plan podcast is focused around upping and increasing our energy when we don't feel it. And so, this is part of that. And goal setting and writing down goals is a part of upping our energy. Especially in those moments when we don't feel it and can help us pull out of that slump. So that was an amazing reminder for all of us. There's this quote by Brian Tracy. He said, never complain, never explain, resist the temptation to defend yourself or make excuses.
Mhm.
And that was a switch I made in my leadership for myself, leading myself and leading others, is saying, am I making excuses for some of these things or am I taking extreme ownership?
Yeah. So be your
And
word, right? Keep your commitments to yourself at the same degree you would keep them to others. And, speaking of energy, because of course the people in our world, yours and mine, they have such demanding days and lives and jobs. And so when we're coaching people, we ask them to take a look at all the spinning plates. At the circus where they have the sticks and they're spinning all these plates and running around, keeping them all going. Well, what ultimately often happens is they all crash. So, when you're a dynamic, excited person, people like to give you things to do. Are those things that you should be doing? Should you say no to some things? So I always encourage coaching clients, look at anything that's going on in their personal life that really doesn't matter to them. They don't know why they got themselves into it. Can I lean out my menu of things to do? Can I eliminate some of those plates? And then prioritizing their non-negotiables, their family time, their exercise. Maybe it's, they spend a half a day at church on Sunday, whatever those things are that are critical to their health and well-being. And then take what's left over, which is the majority, of your day or week, and say, now, how do I need to construct that routine that will help me achieve all of my goals? But if you have, you know, 48 hours of work that you're trying to stuff into a 12-hour day, you're going to fail and you're going to feel like a failure. So lean it out a bit, right? And then zero in and focus.
Sure. And some simple planning behind that can make a really big difference. And saying, the night before, what do I need to do or say no to in order to execute a great day tomorrow? And having that check in on our goals, not just weekly, not just monthly, not just annually, but daily, right?
Yeah, and it does help to have accountability partners. I have a trainer. I go 2 days a week. And I know that if I go there 2 days a week, I'm going to be better all week because when I show up on the next day, he's going to ask me, what did you eat? Did you work out? And I'm not an obsessive, crazy, over the top. It's just normal stuff. And yet, would I do it if I were left to my own devices? Yeah, but not as well. Right. And so it's nice
Right.
to look at who can I surround myself with who understands me and they understand the goals I'm looking to achieve, and we can be supportive of each other, encouraging and supportive, and sometimes maybe a
Mhm.
little tough love.
Absolutely. I think the tough love is a key to that as well. And I learned as I was going through a lot of the processes you're talking about that it's not just one mentor that's needed. One person will not be a mentor to you in everything.
Right.
That's why it's necessary to find other mentors who can help us achieve the specific goals in the different areas of our life, like financial, right? Business, being the best, parent that you can be, and in your health. And you might have a different mentor for each one. And I think it's good when we're looking at our goals to maybe even attach a person
Yes.
to saying who could help hold me accountable, have fierce conversations or tough love with me if necessary, and have that be a part of our plan.
Well, people often say to me when they come to us for coaching, well, I know what I need to do. I just need to do it. Well, we could all say that, right? And that's where the accountability, and yet also you may know what you need to do, and yet that mentor may see something bigger picture that you're not seeing. You can't see the forest for the trees. So they have a different perspective, a different sounding board, and bring new things to the table. So
Yeah.
it's always great. I love the idea, though, of having a mentor for every category.
Hmm. Yeah. And so that leads me into my next question for you, Debbie, which is a little bit of a personal question because I have struggled with this myself and I get to coach with you. So maybe we'll talk about this on one of our next calls. But for those of us who might have stretch goals, right? The ones where it's going to be a challenge to achieve them. And maybe we have families, kids, other things going on in our lives. And we're like, how are we going to have the energy to do this? So at a certain time of day, like 4 or 5 or 6 p.m., I start running out of energy because I start my day so early. So what advice would you give some of us who feel like we're running out of energy and not enough leftovers for some of these other goals that we have?
Well, things they've probably all heard, which is go to bed on time and watch what you eat and drink the night before. It's just so important, though, because it definitely impacts that energy. I remember when I first started coaching people, and I was suddenly given 24 people a day to coach. It was a like a 14-hour back-to-back coaching day, and I would just lay on the floor at the end of the night, exhausted, couldn't move. And then I met someone who was a nutritionist, and he said to me, your problem is, I know you're eating healthy, you're not eating often enough. And he said, so you get hungry and your blood sugar crashes, then you eat a normal size meal. Now your body is digesting. So now again, a crash. If you've ever felt sleepy after lunch because you ate too much lunch. And that doesn't mean you ate a massive amount. It's just he put me on a routine of every 3 hours, a very small amount of food. So I kind of took the 3 meals a day and divided it up into like 6 meals a day. And it was amazing instantly the difference that my energy was the same all across the day. And I've done that for forever, ever since then. And I start often at 5 a.m. with our East Coast clients. I usually finish at 6 p.m. and I feel pretty much the same. But I do think it's I also go to bed at 9:30, right? And so I think it's all of those routines, but that one was a game changer for me to eat those small regular meals to keep that blood sugar even so there weren't the highs and lows. And it was instant. It made a drastic difference.
That's a great life hack for our audience. And it's great news for the people who like to eat their lunch for breakfast, because then they can have half of their lunch at 10 and
Yes,
half of their lunch at 12:30, right?
right, exactly.
Good news for those people. Yep. Um, you know, I hear a lot of people say, I'm just not willing to make sacrifices to reach some of these goals because my family's important, and I get that. That's completely understandable. Yet sometimes they're having to say no to big goals because they feel like they would have to sacrifice too much in honor of seeking a balanced life. Would
Mhm.
you have anything that you would like to share with people who might feel that way?
Yeah, there it could be partially an excuse. Are you using your family as an excuse? So you really have to examine that and say, um, if I did this right, could I achieve my goals and still have the balance? There are times the answer to that might be no. For example, I would have loved to have launched my own coaching company when the girls were very, very young. And I have twins, and they're now 20, almost 29 years old. And yet I knew that if I did that, to launch that company was going to be almost a 20-hour a day for a while. So I had to say no to that temporarily and instead take a job running a large coaching company where I could control the hours. And it was hard. It was hard to say no to that and to put that off for 10 years. In hindsight, it was totally the right thing to do because, as you know, my daughter Taylor is the president of Forward Coaching and
Yeah,
works with
she's
Ben and I.
amazing.
Yeah, and my daughter Erica works with my husband and also launched her own business. So it was a short-term sacrifice. And so I think there are times where you have to take a look at that and say, I know I can be all I can be. For now, maybe I can only go three-quarters of the way there because of the other priorities in my life. Right.
Hmm.
And so it's temporary.
Temporary.
Mhm.
Yeah. And you still had it as a goal, right? It just wasn't an
Absolutely.
immediate one.
It was just a matter of when. And
Hmm.
truly, the when was as soon as they graduated from high school. That was the marker. As soon as they graduate from high school, and I launched the company the very next April Fool's Day. So it took a few months to get everything up and running. Yeah.
A very good time bound goal. And being a role model for so many, that example was phenomenal. So thank you for sharing that with us so we might be able to take that example to our own lives and look at, are we saying no to our goals, or are we saying it's a matter of time? It might just not be right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, when people leave this podcast and go on with their day, what should we do right away, Debbie, to maybe set some goals or revisit the goals that we've already set?
Well, I think a great thing to do is spend a little time each day reflecting on them. And maybe that's as simple as you grab your coffee or tea and you don't turn on the news in the morning, and instead you just stop and think about, what are my goals for the day or what are my goals for the week. I would say though, often people feel pressure to state goals that are not their own goals. So I would encourage you to really look at, what do I really want? And then, am I willing to make the sacrifices to get there? Does my schedule and my plan support getting me there? And then, how, if you have family, spouse, significant other, how am I bringing them into those goals so that they have an understanding of, okay, my husband knows it's a little annoying when I get up at 4:15 in the morning and probably wake him up as I do. And yet he has an understanding of the goals and the why. And I have his buy-in and support. And sometimes you may have someone special and close to you, and they don't understand goal setting. And they maybe don't believe in your ability to achieve those in the way that you could or should. Then find someone who does. And that's the person you would share those goals with. Right?
I love that.
My father-in-law, he passed away at 96, fabulous man, amazing father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and yet he grew up in the Depression. And so I learned early on when I met him that he was the half-empty glass guy. And I remember sharing my goals with him when Don and I first met, and his comment was, well, you won't make it. That's too hard. That's too big. And he wasn't being mean. That's just his mindset. And I realized that as much as I loved him, when he asked me in the future, how's business? I'd say it's all fine, all good. And that's it. And it was great.
Sure.
It was fine. And I found someone else, my husband, other mentors to share those goals with who could be supportive. So it's okay if you love someone in your life that doesn't understand your big goals, just find someone who does to talk to them about.
That's great advice. And thank you for your time today and sharing some of your thoughts and experience with us because, it's just really special to have you as a guest on this podcast because you're a role model for me. And I'm almost like hesitant to share that with others, but I'm going to with our 15-point plan podcast audience and all of the people that might join your company for coaching. And we're really privileged to have you and share some of these thoughts with us. And we hope that this episode ups your energy and look at some of the other episodes in the 15-point plan podcast related to goals and journaling and goal setting, and then just tie them all together. And so thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.